Well, good morning, everybody. I am Kurt Van Wagenen, CEO and President of First Light Fiber and the INCOMPAS Board Chair. Let me welcome you to Louisville and to our annual INCOMPAS show. And first, let me thank you all for being here early this morning, particularly the folks who went on a bourbon tour yesterday, which I know there are probably several folks in the room who went on the bourbon tour, including me. So it was very fun. But welcome this morning. We really have a great keynote this morning with Chip Pickering and Charlie Ergen from DISH. Going to be exciting for all of us who are in this industry and always looking for new, exciting change in the industry. So we'll hear Charlie's comments on that. But before I introduce Chip and I'd like to make a few thank yous here first. Let me start with the INCOMPAS staff. I mean, a show like this is very difficult to put on. And, you know, we have our friends from Smith Buckland who have been helping us for years as consultants with these shows. But our staff also does a tremendous amount of work with this show while they're doing their day job. It's a small staff. So please thank them for the terrific job they've done with this show. I'd also like to thank our member companies. You know, the member companies are just critical to everything we do. The voice that you give us in terms of what's happening in the industry, how we should prioritize initiatives at the staff level and at the board level. We really appreciate all the input, and we appreciate your attendance here. And for those of you who sponsored this show, we want to thank you for that as well. I know many of you in the room are part of member companies. For those of you who are not member companies, really encourage you to talk with some folks from the staff while you're here and really understand the terrific benefits that membership and INCOMPAS provides. So I encourage you to do that. And then lastly, I'd like to thank the board of directors. And we have a slide up here of member companies that have been representatives on our board of directors, either currently or in the past. You know, these are volunteer positions, and these folks all have busy day jobs, but they participate actively in the board meetings and in the success of INCOMPAS. So I'd like to thank my fellow board members. It's really a privilege to work with the talent that we have at this board. I'd ask you all, anybody who's a current board member or a former board member, would you please stand up? Thank you all. And now I'd like to introduce Chip Pickering, the CEO of INCOMPAS. I mean, Chip has a really storied career here. He joined INCOMPAS in 2014 as our CEO. He's transformed this organization in so many different ways, and we're really a player, particularly in policy, but also in terms of how we bring companies together in this vast ecosystem of ours at a very exciting time for our industry. Prior to 2014, Chip was a member of Congress. He's from the 3rd District in Mississippi, where he was the vice chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee and a member of the Telecommunications Subcommittee. He's a true champion of our cause. Let's give Chip a round of applause and welcome him to the stage.
Well, thank you, Kurt, and for all the board members, all the sponsors, and everyone who is here today. We're very proud and very pleased to be in Louisville, Kentucky. As you think about Muhammad Ali, Churchill Downs, the spirits industry, bourbon, it really has a rich legacy, and it symbolizes in the heartland really the fight, the competition, the race, and then the ability to kind of enjoy life as well. And so as we come together in Louisville to celebrate INCOMPAS, and we're almost to our 40th anniversary as the founding voice of competition. And as Charlie comes today, we're going to talk about the future of competition and the future of new networks and 5G and what that means for our economy, our country, and really the same spirit that we started with in 1981, the spirit of disruption, the spirit of innovation, and of competition. And so we have a great lineup, great set of panels after Charlie that will focus on 5G, and we're very proud of our membership. As you saw, our board of directors, we've been over the last 6 years building a foundation that brings together something that's very unique and distinct. No other association has this, and that is that we have the leading internet and content companies that are driving the demand to the networks and the infrastructure of the future, and the applications and innovations that then ride on top of those networks. And as we move into an economy that will be completely network dependent, network driven, that will really be transformative in every sector and disruptive in every sector. So we're proud that our membership has now given us the ability to bring this rich ecosystem of both internet leading companies, leading infrastructure companies together. So let me just talk a few things before we get started with our first keynote with Charlie. And that is, I want to thank all the sponsors, all the exhibitors. I want to especially thank Crown Castle, our session room sponsor. I want to give special recognition to everyone who came last night to our opening reception. And I want to thank our board's sponsors for a fun start to the show. David, this morning with Accent Networks, got us off to the races with a good panel on technology migration, and we want to thank him for all the work that he has done every year to put together tremendous panels. And before we go into today's, I want to announce something for 2020, and that is that we're going to be at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas for our 2020 show, so back to Vegas. And we're looking forward to that. And then on March 3rd, we'll have our Policy Summit in Washington at New America. The Las Vegas show will be November 2nd through the 4th. And so two great events, two great ways to come together to both be the champion in our advocacy and to bring together our business partners and the relationships that they have in the market. Today, we have the Deal Center that's open from 7:30 to 4. And I want to make sure that everybody gets there. And then the expo is open from 10:30 to 1:30. And then we have a 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock the Slugger Social Networking reception. So be sure to check all of that out. A buyer's forum at 1:30 to 2:30 in the expo hall. Something that started with Julia Stroud, the chief of staff of INCOMPAS, and that has been building and something very effective to bring buyers together into the space and the networks. So if you are an INCOMPAS member, today we really want, and we have a DISH and a meeting room. We've reached an agreement with DISH, and I want to really call your attention to it. That is a retail partner program. And if you're a member of INCOMPAS, you'll be able to have access to their services, their over-the-top, their sling, their devices, the installation, as you build out networks and you serve your communities or your businesses on a national or a local scale. DISH has been extremely innovative in the market, and as they build their 5G network and then have the access to it, hopefully an MVNO, we believe that the full range of DISH products and with our members can be a great partnership. So we encourage everyone to check that out today. So I'm going to get right to it, Charlie. DISH, a company born out of competition policy. I was a young staffer in 1991 for Senator Lott. And as we were doing the Cable Act, it was to allow the satellite industry to compete against cable. And we didn't know exactly what would come out of a new industry, someone who could see something that didn't exist and to compete. And it was extremely successful in bringing the satellite industry into a competitive position with cable. Charlie has been in the vanguard of also disrupting the market in streaming and over the top with Sling TV. And as we get to streaming and skinny bundles and the disruption that he's brought and over the top internet services has been something that is also transforming the market. So University of Tennessee, Colorado, Denver, rural America. Those are the hallmarks of Charlie's background and his company. But we'll get to talk today about what is going to be the future of 5G and how does DISH and his company play a role, not only of what he has disrupted in the past, but what he's going to disrupt in the future. And so I'm excited to hear what he has to say. And with Charlie, without any further ado, we welcome you. Well, Charlie, thanks again for being here and coming in. Now, you don't wear a tie very often.
No, I don't.
And so we're...
Only when I'm selling, and I'm not actually selling this morning, so, but I'm selling this afternoon.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Well, before we get to the future, I'd like you to give a little bit to our audience. How did you get here? And what is the history of DISH? And how did you see something in the satellite industry? Or what was the vision or the hope that made you start something when nothing existed before that?
Well, we didn't really have much vision, and it certainly wasn't just myself. We had three founders that all still work in the company. One of them happens to be my wife. I recognized early on I didn't have the personality to work for somebody else. So the only way I was going to be able to work was for myself. We wanted to start a business. And so what was interesting about the communications and that time, the big DISH satellite television business back in 1980, was that we didn't know anything about it, but neither did anybody else. So I had worked as a financial analyst for Frito-Lay, and there were people that had been making potato chips for 30 years. They knew a lot more about it than I did. So it was going to take me a while to move up the ranks. But in satellite television, we didn't know anything. Nobody else knew anything. It was a nascent industry. And so what was interesting about it was we could go as fast as we could learn and as hard as we could work. And we did that. We learned and we were very focused on that business. And then, along the way, you have to get lucky but we fell in love with the industry, and then the vision became really to improve the world that communicates, and we've kind of stayed focused on that for a long time.
Now, there's a Mississippi connection. You like to launch your new products where?
Well, DirecTV launched their first product in Mississippi, and we were a distributor for DirecTV. So we actually sold our competitor's product, and so we were there for the launch of satellite television, small dish DBS in Mississippi. But then it's been the political environment for Mississippi more so than anything else, because, as you mentioned, Trent Lott, but not just Trent Lott, a lot of other, now Senator Wicker, have always been on the forefront of the commerce committees and the communication committees, and so there's, I don't know, all roads lead back to Mississippi for some reason. And by the, you mentioned 1991, when we decided to build our own satellites, there were 2 or 3 things that had to happen. One of them was the actual law that allowed us to actually, cable companies to actually be required to sell us their programming. And back in, prior to 1992, they didn't have to sell us their programming. So it didn't make a lot of sense to launch your own satellites and compete when you weren't going to have any of the channels. And so legislation, good government policy is very important. And so it's one of the things we learned in our relatively early in our careers, which most companies don't, because you think Washington is this, big place that nobody does anything. It's quite the opposite, in my experience. And good policy makes a difference. And we were fortunate to have people like Chip and others that on both sides of the aisle that instituted good public policy that allowed competition.
Speaking of good public policy, talk a little bit about, a lot of people might think DISH is satellite. What are you doing deploying a 5G network? And did this just happen? Did it fall from the sky? Or did you actually start a vision a long time ago, or a strategy a long time ago, to be positioned to be able to deploy a 5G network, disrupt the wireless industry, and to win the future for the company?
Well, we started thinking about the terrestrial wireless business 25 years ago. We entered our first auction actually in December 25 years ago. So next month will be our 25th first auction that we entered, which was the third auction the government ever held. We've been in every auction for spectrum since then. Most of the times we don't get any spectrum because we're just not big enough to compete with some of the bigger guys. But we've picked our spots to get spectrum, and over time we were able to amass, you know, over 100 megahertz of spectrum terrestrially. So we have critical mass to enter the business. So it's been a long time coming. What we've waited for is the paradigm shift that would allow us to enter the marketplace and compete. So one of the things that I've learned is that when it comes to technology, it changes, and it's cruel if you get the timing right. But if you can get the timing right for a particular paradigm shift, then ironically, you want to go compete with the very, very biggest companies that have legacy, because that's the most difficult for them to change, and they have so much investment in the old way of doing things that it's hard for from their employees who want to do it the old way and are less apt to learn the new way, and the fact that they have so much legacy they don't want to write off, right? And the fact that they got to tear down and rebuild, and they in a position with customers, it's hard to do that. That's where you want to be. So if you get the timing right, then you have a great chance of success. 5G is a huge paradigm shift in telecommunications. Not always not because of all the things. It is in part because of the fact that you can have lower latency and you have higher speeds and can connect more things. But it's also the fact that you now have the ability to put your network basically in the cloud instead of at the base of the tower. And that's a huge advantage in terms of cost efficiencies and flexibility in your network. And that's the paradigm shift that's going to be out there. That's going to be important to everybody in this room.
So talk a little bit about, so AT&T, Verizon, incumbents, entrenched, dominant in the market today. 3 years from now, as you build out a new 5G network, do you have cost advantages, structural advantages, strategic advantages? What do you see 3 years from today?
Well, we'll have 3 years from now, you know, we'll have our network pretty complete. So we will definitely have a cost advantage, but most importantly, our network will be more flexible and be able to do more things. So in business, you only have to be able to do two things. You got to be better, and you got to be less expensive. If you can be better and less expensive, then you can compete. And we'll be less expensive in terms of our cost for producing a gig. And our network will be more flexible because once it's in the cloud, then you can do things like slice your network. If you can slice your network, then you can go to the whole world that doesn't exist, and to enterprise customers and as well as consumers in a way that we don't do today, which means that the way you'll use your devices and the way you'll connect will just be different, and we'll just be better and more efficient at it. They'll catch up. I mean, they have to tear their networks down and rebuild them. They'll do that. They have a huge advantage because they've got scale and they've got 100 million customers, and we don't. We have 12 million customers today, so in video. So we'll see how it goes. But I'd rather I'd rather have what we have, and there's a reason that your eyes are in the front of your head, because you look forward. And so we're not looking backwards, we're looking at where things go forward. And so I can give you a real world example, but in 1992, actually 1991, when we first met, that's when we made the decision that we were going to build and launch our own satellites. The paradigm shift was something called digital, right? And it was digital compression, and most people didn't think it would work. In fact, the entire cable industry, I sat on and watched a panel while every expert in the world said digital compression couldn't possibly work. We had seen it as a company in the lab. Every single expert, MIT, wherever it was, it can't work. It's theoretical, so forth and so on, right? Well, by 2 years later, we were doing it, and the same people on the panel 2 years later was, we always knew it was going to work. That's what they said. So I learned a really good lesson there. But because of digital compression, we were able to build a network that was less expensive than cable analog, but it was also a better product. So the consumer experience was better. So we were less expensive and we were better, but the consumer, at that time you had a scrolling guide. It was an analog guide. It scrolled. You had to sit, and I can remember watching TV, and I'd want to know what was on, what game was on, and I'd have to wait about 3 minutes to find out ESPN scrolling. We could make our guide interactive because we're digital. We invented the DVR. Suddenly you could record without a VCR blinking 12. I'd gone to 100% of the homes that I went to install a satellite, they had a VCR and it blinked 12, and the customer didn't know what to do, right? And so suddenly we could automate that and make that. And then once we had a DVR, we could skip commercials. You know, broadcasters weren't real happy, but the consumers loved that feature. So we were able to innovate and do things that the cable. Now cable ultimately became digital, and as it became digital, they then could do something called broadband, right? So we take great credit for helping the cable industry innovate along with DirecTV. So the same thing's going to happen in wireless. The incumbents are going to get there. They'll have to innovate. They will, and they'll get better. That's what competition does.
You know, as we talk through the history, INCOMPAS started in 1981. Our Sprint was a founding member, and they deployed the first fiber digital long-distance network, and really transformed the internet. The long-distance networks, and then what became the internet backbone, and it went from analog to digital. What you did in satellite transformed the cable infrastructure because of your competitive entry, and you forced them to go from analog to digital. And those are really the two building blocks of what our economy now is. People didn't think you could do it then, and they doubt you now. They're saying that, you know, you're not going to build it, can't work. Some of the same things that they said then, they're saying now. Your response to that?
Well, that's true. I mean, I think there certainly are a number of skeptics, probably fewer skeptics today than there were this time last year, so we're gaining on them. But that's not the way we manage. The way we manage is we don't pay a lot of attention to the external noise. What you have to do in management, I'm sure some of you with your own business do it, is internally what you have to have is a team that believes you can do it, right? And can't's not really part of our vocabulary. So and if you can get a team of people who believe you can do, and you row in the same direction, and you trust each other, then you can do it. You can do anything, right? So the old saying, what the mind can conceive, you can achieve, right? So, but you have to have those ingredients. You have to have a great team. You have to have people internally that believe you can do it, and they have to row in the same direction and trust. You have to trust your management. You have to trust your team. And if you do that, then you have a very good chance of success. There's always a chance that you'll fail, right? And if it was a sure thing, everybody would be doing it. But you know, in 39, we just starting our 40th year next week, or starts our 40th year. So, but we've had some mistakes, and we've made, you know, but we've never failed. And success breeds success, and I would expect that we'll be very successful.
And that kind of brings up another part of your culture, or maybe some of your leadership traits. You have a reputation as being a good poker player, card player, but what most people may not know is that you're also a mountain climber. How does that help you do what you do?
Well, you know, I'm more of a hiker than a mountain climber, but that's my escape from, you know, from having to make decisions all day long. I'm just a member of a team. I'm probably the lowest member of that team. It's external to the company, so I'm just happy to be part of a team that gets to do something that's fun and exciting. But the principles are the same. When you do climb a mountain, there's a couple things you better do. You better prepare. So you better do your homework, and then you have to work as a team, and then you have to trust your team, because sometimes you're in a rope, and if somebody does the wrong thing in a rope, you're not going to be doing too well. So the same principles in a business, but and then I was never a good poker player. That's an urban legend, right? But there were before we started DISH, there were three things that I did do that were great preparation for business. One was I did play poker, and that was the skill of, you didn't always have to have the best hand to win. That was reading people, that was emotion, play into people's emotion. They're just things that people do under those stressful situations that turn out to be pretty common. I also became a backgammon player. Backgammon player, it's a lot of luck in backgammon, but a really good backgammon player will think multiple moves ahead, right? So think about when we started, we were a few moves ahead in wireless auctions 25 years ago, to our credit, or to our, I think. But you have to think multiple moves ahead of what might happen, what you might roll, right, to be a really good backgammon player. And then learn how to count cards, to blackjack, and that was disciplined and scientific. So when you play blackjack and you count cards, there always is a right or wrong answer. It is scientific. There is never a 50-50. It's always take a card, not take a card, double down. There's always the right thing to do, no matter how you feel, no matter what your gut instinct tells you. It's a discipline, and you get into business where a lot of times it's a discipline. You don't get emotional about something. It's strictly the statistics and odds. And the odds are really good if you're cheaper and better.
So that kind of gets us to the next question, the next big thing. As I watched during the T-Mobile Sprint merger, I thought you played that hand extremely well. And to be in position at the end to really strike an agreement with the Department of Justice and with the merging parties, Sprint and T-Mo, to put DISH in a tremendous position. If you don't mind, I know that we're not through the process yet, and there's still the action between DOJ and the states. But talk a little bit about what the merger means to DISH, the conditions that you have in that agreement, and how those elements build into your strategic vision.
Well, I mean, I think I think when we looked at the merger, we opposed the merger because going from 4 to 3, we believe would lessen competition and raise consumer rates, or in the alternative, rates wouldn't go down as fast as they otherwise should with the technology changes that are coming. So, but we had already positioned ourselves to enter the marketplace, so that had taken over a long period of time. So we weren't necessarily opposed to the merger as long as there was a remedy from the state 4 to 4. Ultimately, I think that the justice staff and management team agreed with the fact that 4 to 3 wasn't the right thing for this country, and that there needed to be a fourth entrant and there to be a remedy. I don't think they didn't specify that would be DISH. They just said there needs to be a fourth. I think they went to T-Mobile and said you need to figure out how to get a fourth entrant. The problem was there weren't a lot of candidates for that. The cable industry was this is public. I think Charter's publicly said, hey, we were really interested, but they had just doing an MVNO deal didn't really bring control of your own destiny, your own data, your own core. So it really is half an entrant, so to speak. So maybe you get to 3.5, but you weren't going to get to 4. And cable industry they were in a position, they were in a great position, but they'd sold their spectrum. So rather than enter the marketplace, get spectrum, keep the spectrum, keep building that portfolio, they had sold their spectrum to Verizon, and it's a little known fact, but they actually sold a lot of their spectrum to Sprint because they owned a big piece of Clearwire, right? So they literally had hundreds of megahertz of spectrum at their disposal that they sold. So now they were going.
You said they played the wrong card?
Well, they do what so many public companies do, which is Wall Street wants short-term gain, and to hold on to spectrum and to cost you money, cost of capital, your opportunity cost to win for it's a longer-term play. They weren't in a position to do that as public companies, and so Wall Street applauded as they sold their spectrum, but it might not have been the right long-term play for them. But so I don't think they became a viable alternative, and so that left the really only company that had spectrum and was playing a little bit longer-term game. That was us, and so we were able to work a deal with T-Mobile. But I think that's how that evolved. And then obviously it's up to the states. The states clearly, when it was 4 to 3, I'm very sympathetic to what their position, because we shared that position. I think they maybe haven't done as good a job as I would like to look at the remedy and say, what does the world look like now? But it really boils down to a weakened Sprint that for at least the last 7 years, because we looked at buying that company 7 years ago, a little less than 7 years ago, really hasn't competed for 7 years from a practical. Is that a better alternative than a new entrant that's going to go build a modern new network with 5G cloud architecture? Is a weakened Sprint, or is it time to give a new technology a chance? That'd be like the states are saying we'd rather have Blockbuster and Hollywood Video compete than bring Netflix in, right? I mean, that's essentially what they're saying, and I don't think that's, I think that's I hope that is a losing argument. Well, I think Netflix is a good thing, and I think DISH and 5G architecture will be a good thing for this country.
Well, in our audience and in our membership, we have a lot of fiber companies, and as you reach this agreement, you have a requirement to build out to 70% of the American population by, I believe, June of 2023.
That's correct.
And you also have an MVNO platform, and you have Boost divestiture for about 9 million subscribers in the prepaid market. And there's also a condition that allows for the devices to be required to have something called an eSIM. Talk a little bit about the opportunities for our member companies to partner with you and backhaul to build MVNO, and how transformative or disruptive your new network is going to be in the market.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the remedies, which are super important, because it allows DISH to enter the marketplace as a full-time competitor day one, really. You start with about approximately 9 million subscribers. You start with the T-Mobile network at your disposal. We'll be able to provision new customers on T-Mobile network, which is a far superior network to the Sprint network, so there's a lot of advantages, particularly in geography. Having said that, the eSIM is something that's going to be transformative. It's in other countries around the world. Here, the incumbents have fought innovation and change, obviously. We're excited about it because it allows us to you can port your phone number today pretty easily, but now you'll be able to port your phone at the same time. That's a huge thing. That'll create a lot of competition and innovation. So. But having said that, our philosophy, we said this many times, is our philosophy in building a business is where somebody else has infrastructure that we don't have to build and we can save our capital, and where they share our vision of where things are going, and if they're willing to work with us, then we'd like to partner with them, right? And that, in satellite television, that was small business people around the country. That was a security company who did the encryption and smart cards and development for us. That was satellite manufacturers or rocket launchers or billing companies or even backhaul companies, because we were backhaul locals and local locals. We didn't build that infrastructure ourselves. There were a few cases where nobody would partner with us, and we had to build that. Nobody was going to build our uplink center for us, so we had to build it. We didn't know how to build an uplink center, but we figured it out. So the same thing I think will happen with our wireless business. Where people want to partner with us, we're going to do it. And probably we're a little bit more credible than we were back when we were trying to launch our own satellites. So I think we'll have a few more people that'll be willing to work with us, but not everybody. And there'll be cases where we have to build something ourselves. But I'm hoping that's not a lot. So some of the people in this room, if you have fiber, if you have a tower, if you have a small business, if you have customers, see a mirror if you want video, but obviously there's things we can share, particularly, and I've had a chance to talk to some members over the years, not everybody, but certainly, particularly in rural America, where rural America doesn't support overbuilds and we just don't have the ego to have our own sandbox. We don't have vice president of sandbox 1, vice president of sandbox 2. And that's what happens in big companies. They won't partner with you because that means the vice president of the sandbox loses some control, right? And so, and they want to be senior vice president of the sandbox, and we don't have any executives, so we don't get any sandbox. So I spend most of my time making sure we don't have sandboxes.
Well, as I listen to you and as I've watched you over the last almost 30 years build your company, position for today, I'm not going to bet against you. And I think that you have a tremendous opportunity to do something that's very significant for the country and for the mission, the culture and the character of your company and your traits. I just want to thank you for what you've done across the country in the satellite industry, and now for the 5G future and the wireless networks, what I think that you're really going to build. And so I thank you for being here today, being a member. I want to give real quickly, I know that we're running out of time, a chance for anybody to ask a question from the audience.
We'll take questions. Thanks for letting me be here today. But I think our best days are ahead of us. We're not a rear view. We're not looking in the rear view mirror. We're proud of our legacy of a company, but our best days are ahead of us, and we have a chance to our company kind of grown in stair steps, and we're hoping the next stair step is a good place of growth. But most importantly, we just think we can build a good product, and it can make a difference in people's lives. Monica has a question, but that's because she's trained to ask questions.
Hi. There's been some concern about the possible foreign influence in the 5G networks, especially in rural America. Can you address how you'll supply your network infrastructure and whether your company would be involved in manufacturing some of the equipment if it came to that?
Yeah, so I don't have a Defense Department clearance, so I can't speak to the nature of, I'd leave that up to the experts, but I think it's pretty clear from what I can tell, and Chip probably seen the same thing, that on both sides of the aisle in this country, there's a fear of foreign influence in communication networks and the kind of things that the things that could happen as a result of that. And obviously particularly in rural America, some of our networks have a bit of potential issues there. I look at it a little bit different way. What probably the most exciting thing is that because we're going to build a standalone network as a greenfield, we get to actually design and architect a state-of-the-art network, something that really the only other country that's really doing that in a big way is China, right? Even Korea, which is doing 5G today, is still a hybrid network with their 4 LTE network. So we get to do something for the clean sheet of paper that isn't being done around the world, that should give, if done properly, give the United States some advantage. Second thing is we can use American vendors. So the third thing is, because we're building our network will be cloud native, it's mostly software, it's not hardware. And there's no other country that builds better software than this country. So we're able to take the strengths of the United States and maybe build something that's a little bit different, that's probably good for national security, although I'm just not an expert in that. I'd leave that to other people to say. But it certainly can be more American and certainly can be more software, where I think we're more dominant. And so it becomes more exportable for this country to around the world, to other telecommunications networks. And that's a race versus foreign countries. And so I think that's an important part of where we're trying to go. The Trump administration, there was somebody wrote a white paper about how this country, the government should have their own network. And while we don't agree with that, we think private enterprise should be doing that. We do agree with the context, or much of the context of that white paper, which is, we need to have a secure network that's 5G capable in the United States. So that's an exciting thing to do, because you can, you're playing on a big stage, and we're a mid-sized company, so it's kind of fun to say you're a mid-sized company, but you get to play on a bigger stage. So I feel like we're going from AAA baseball to the major leagues, and you get a chance in the major leagues, and sometimes you hit a home run the first time up at bat, and sometimes you strike out, right? And sometimes you get sent back to the minor leagues, and we think we're here to stay. Did that answer your question? And it's possible. I think there's a mood in Washington that they may want to replace some of the network in rural America. That's probably an opportunity. Since we're building a new network at the same time, that might be an opportune time to work with people in rural America as you're taking old equipment down. And why don't you put new modern architecture equipment up, right? And if you're doing that in rural America, why don't you tie into a nationwide network that we're building? That seems like a perfect fit. But who knows? Yeah.
I probably don't need a microphone, but my name is Carolyn Ridley. I'm with CenturyLink, and this question might be getting in the weeds a little bit too much, but how does DISH navigate the issues with the municipalities as you try to deploy your network across the country in a very aggressive time frame?
Well, that'll be probably that will probably be the toughest thing we have to navigate, because we don't have you don't have as much control over that. You can work harder, but that doesn't mean that the municipality is going to move faster, or it doesn't mean that permit's going to get off somebody's desk. But having said that, having built the vast majority of an IoT network, we're now pretty familiar with which municipalities move quicker than others, and so we kind of know what the long lead things. The current FCC, to their credit, has done a lot with speeding that process up, and there's now some restrictions on it's certainly much easier to deploy a network today than it was, several years ago before the FCC did some enforcement there. That may get challenged. It is being challenged in courts. It might slow things down, but we're well aware of that, and we're probably Texas is going to get built before California, right, or Hawaii. Right? I'm pretty certain of that. And it's not because we wouldn't want to build those at the same time. It's just that we know the process will take longer. But none of the process takes 3 years. Right? I mean, from an IoT point of view, we were able to get permits everywhere within a year.
Let me, real quickly, I want to recognize Amir. If you'd please stand up just real quickly, who's partnering with us on the video program. So this is the man, if anybody wants to partner with DISH, he can help make a good deal.
No, hopefully he doesn't make too good a deal. He'll partner with you, and it'll be a deal. Yeah. It's not too good a deal.
A fair deal. And now, for those who want to learn about it, between 11 and 2, and tomorrow between 10 and 2 in the Hikes Point meeting room. So I wanted to get that plug in.
Yeah, good.
And so any other questions? We have I know that we're running low on time, so one last question. And
well, it's good with Monica's at it again.
Do you expect to have a branded handset or some sort of wireless consumer device as opposed to just a generic off-the-shelf device?
Yes, we do think that should the transaction go through, then we'll have branded handsets, and so we're in active discussions for those today. But we do think that there's innovation that can be done in the handset, right? And we think there's handsets out that are really good that consumers need to know more about, that maybe aren't as, so we think there's a lot of innovation that can be done there too. Let's get one question here. This is going to be the last question, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think about the fixed wireless strategy for example, the 5G fixed wireless that Verizon is deploying? Do you think there's a place for that for DISH?
Well, I'm interested to hear what Chet says about Starry, who's on a panel coming up, because he's actually doing the 20 in the millimeter wave frequencies. He's actually doing it, so he's a real expert in that, and I'd probably defer to what he says. I think that for mobility, I'm a little bit more concerned about that from a mobility point of view, that it doesn't really solve the millimeter wave. At least today's technology doesn't solve your mobility issues as much as. But from the fixed side, I think it makes a lot of sense. And we've been as a company been looking at fixed wireless for a long, long time. We've dealt with with WISP and some small people for a long time. Our sister company, EchoStar, has invested in a company called Tirana, which is still more in the laboratory, but potentially big breakthroughs in near line of sight and interference cancellation for unlicensed spectrum. So we think that there's technology coming in fixed wireless, both in frequency and both with hardware and software. And I think that's, I was talking to Ted earlier, who's involved, some people here are doing it. I think my nose tells me, right, that's just going to be a much bigger business, and that's one way, particularly in small towns and in rural America, that's one way that we can help bridge the digital divide. And realize we do satellite broadband today, and we have about 1.5 million customers in satellite broadband. But that's a broadband of last resort kind of product, and I'd hope we can, because we have some latency with satellite that you just wouldn't have on the terrestrial fixed wireless network. So we'd like to obsolete ourselves there if we could. So anybody that's in fixed wireless, that's a place we'd like to see, more happen, and we think the trends are in the right direction there. So, okay.
Well, as we go forward into the rest of the panels, and as you build the network, what excites me is that I really think that the next 3 to 5 years is going to be to the advantage of the new entrants, to the new competitors, to the new technology, and it's really going to be a period, our era of entrepreneurship. And as we have builders in this room, fixed and fiber, I think that you're going to create a lot of opportunity for a lot of people, and we're thankful that you're here and as part of INCOMPAS, and that you're positioned as well as you are to really continue the disruptive, competitive presence.
Well, we'll come back in 3 years and see how we did.
Yes. Well, I'm betting on you. Thank you for being here, and I want everybody to join me in thanking Charlie